Hello and welcome to the Angling Flaneurs. Today we're in the East End of London, Bethnal Green to be precise, and we'll be finishing up at Bethnal Green Tube Station and looking at a terrible disaster that occurred here on March the 3rd, 1943, with a sad loss of 173 lives. But before we reach Bethnal Green Tube Station, we're walking through Reivers Field. Now this is an area that I've seen on the train for over 40 years travelling into Liverpool Street, but I've never actually walked through it. Now, a little bit of history here. Following World War II, this land was cleared of housing damaged by bombs for a park that was originally planned over a much larger area than the present site. The field, the park, was named to commemorate the historic local silk weaving industry. And in the last 15 years, it has become the home of the largest Bengali festival outside of Bangladesh, which celebrates Bengali New Year each May. Now we can see a stainless steel structure, Weaving Identity, by Peter Dunn, sculptured in 2003, and is situated to remind walkers of the area's weaving heritage history. We've just viewed a plaque, partly covered by vegetation, that lists some of the names of the Huguenot silk weavers that once worked and lived here. I've dropped in a much better picture of the sculpture taken from the Londonist publication, and I'll quote from the publication, which gives some interesting insight into the history of the sculptor and looked at it in a way that I had completely failed. So let's start. It quotes, "Tower Hamlets Council no doubt is criticising the human pursuit of divinity through technology and contrasting its futility. In the beginning was God. God created man in his own image and saw that he was good. Then man created CCTV. CCTV captured the image of man. It saw that he was bad and issued him with a fixed penalty notice for dropping litter." The Londonist also goes on to state that it's a balletic footballer engaging in a lunging tackle while blatantly using his hand, like Maradona and the hand of God, to support a surveillance camera. Another camera climbs above him, like a watchful corner flag. All this meaning to such a supposedly simple sculpture, and I failed miserably, so many thanks once again to the Londonist publication, and obviously some fairly strong and heartfelt comments from a local resident, I would imagine. We've now made it to Bethnal Green Gardens, the site of Bethnal Green Tube Station. So let's start a recount and look at the terrible history of this tragedy. The backdrop to the events of March 3rd was a British media report on a heavy RAF bombing raid on Berlin on the night of the 1st and 2nd of March. London was expecting a bloody reprisal from the Luftwaffe, and on the evening of March 3rd at 8:17, a civil defence siren sounded, beginning a large and orderly flow of people down the blacked out staircase from the street. This was a result of a discharge of said battery anti-aircraft rockets fired from nearby Victoria Park. As people walked into the unfinished tube station, a middle-aged woman and a child fell over 3 steps from the base, and others fell around her, tangled in an immovable mass which grew as they struggled to nearly 300 people. Though over 100 people escaped, 173 people, mainly women and children, were asphyxiated. News of this appalling tragedy was withheld for 36 hours, and reporting of what had happened was censored, giving rise to allegations of a cover-up, though it was in line with existing wartime reporting restrictions. Fuller details were eventually released on the 20th of January 1945, the cause having been kept secret for 22 months because the government felt the information might have resulted in the Germans continuing air raids with the intention of causing similar panics. A public memorial took too long to be built, but eventually in 2007 a Stairway to Heaven Memorial Trust was established. And before us we can see some moving tributes and accounts of that awful night. The memorial was designed by architects hepaticus and balsamum of arboreal architecture, and it was unveiled on the 16th of December 2017, more than 74 years after the event. And it takes the form of an open inverted stairway of 18 steps made of teak overhanging a concrete plinth, and it's fully sized replica of the stairway where the awful disaster occurred. The names of the dead are carved on the exterior, and the top covering has 173 small holes, allowing light through, representing the dead. A plaque commemorating the 43 disaster was erected on the station's southeastern staircase, on which the deaths occurred, for the 50th anniversary in 1993. Now, through personal accounts, let's try and go back and see what London was like in 1943, with the ever-present threat of air raids. And up to 7,000 people would regularly use Bethnal Green Tube station in the event of an air raid. The wartime government was not sure that tube stations were the answer to the air raid threat. Underground stations appeared to be fairly safe havens, yet anxiety persisted about people developing a deep shelter mentality and refusing to resurface. And wouldn't London's vital transport system not be thrown into confusion with so many bundles of humanity asleep on its subterranean platforms? I dropped in the picture of Joan Martin, who had been qualified as a doctor for just 1 year when she led the team treating the casualties at Queen Elizabeth Hospital for Children. Like many involved in the disaster, she was told to never speak of what happened that night, as the British government, fearful of damaging public morale, attempted a cover-up. This amazing lady suffered recurrent nightmares until her death at the age of 102 in 2018. She was appointed an MBE in 1985, largely owing to her contribution to the Girl Guide movement and her work teaching disabled children to swim. During my research for this blog, I came across an article by Brian Penn, whose mum was involved and survived the disaster. She was 16 at the time. She was working in a factory bottling disinfectant. The family home was at 12 Tite Street, a 5-minute walk from the tube station. People were initially banned from using the tube to shelter from air raids. Authorities feared a siege mentality and disruption of troop movements, so people had to rely on conventional brick buildings or the woefully inadequate Anderson shelters. Rules were eventually relaxed as the tube became a safe haven for thousands of Londoners. Bethnal Green Tube was built in 1939 as part of the Central Line Eastern Extension. It soon became a subterranean environment with a canteen and library serving residents. People bickered over the best spots like tourists fighting over a sunbed. Weddings and parties were commonplace as the tube quietly worked its way into people's daily routines. Dinners were half eaten and bodies half washed when the sirens went off, and eventually everyone bolted for the tube. In his article, Brian went on to mention that no policemen were on duty at the entrance on that night, and there were no central handrails on the stairway, nor was there sufficient light or making of steps. 2 years before the disaster, the council had asked if they could make alterations to the entrance, but were denied funds by the government. Typically, handrails were installed and steps painted white after the incident. Let's finish our vlog now on this sombre note. It's been a very sombre vlog, but when you're in Bethnal Green next time, please pass over to the tube station and pay your respects to those 173 people who lost their lives on this tragic night, March the 3rd, 1943.